Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our regular Thursday lecture. I hope that your day is going great. And before we get into the nitty-gritty of today's session, let me just briefly introduce myself and talk about today's topic. So as some of you may already know, my name is Victoria, and I'm the outreach coordinator for the EducationUSA network here in Ukraine. We are part of the global network of the US Department of State committed to promoting diversity in the US higher education system and, of course, building bridges of knowledge across borders. As the official source on US higher education, we offer accurate, comprehensive, and unbiased information about opportunities to study at accredited colleges and universities in the United States. We understand that the process of applying to the US can be quite challenging, so we are here to help you with any step of the process and answer all your questions from beginning to end. So today we are going to dive deeper into studying in the United States as a Ukrainian student. Have you ever dreamed of becoming a student in the United States? Do you want to make this dream a reality? Do you want to know how to make the most out of your US college experience? Which resources for students are available on campus? And what are some of the do's and don'ts in the US? Well, we're going to talk about all of these things and more today. It's my pleasure to welcome Katerina Sazonova, a Ukrainian graduate of an MFA program in film and TV directing at Columbia College, Chicago, who will give you an inside scoop into the application process at American colleges and universities, essay writing, preparing a competitive portfolio, seeking funding, and of course, talk about what it's really like to study in the United States. Before we get started, I would just like to encourage you to stay proactive and ask lots of questions. We would love to hear from you. So please do not hesitate to put any of your queries in the comments below. I'll, of course, be monitoring them and make sure we get to every single one at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, Kateryna, it's such a pleasure to have you here with us. Please take it away. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. Thank you, Victoria. As Victoria introduced myself, I'm Kateryna Sazonova, and I lived in Chicago for the past 3 and almost a half years. I've graduated with an MFA from Columbia College, Chicago, about half a year ago. And yeah, I went through this whole application process thing, and with, of course, great help from EducationUSA and Competitive College Club. And I'm here to share my experience with you. And I hope you will find it useful. And yes, please ask any questions. We will have a Q&A session after my short presentation. And yeah, in this short presentation, I will just talk about my own experience. Of course, we are all very different, and we all have different majors and different interests, and we are looking at different colleges and different states. But yeah, I'm here to talk about my experience, so I hope you will find it useful. So we can start by learning a little bit about myself. So who am I? I am Kateryna. I am, of course, from Ukraine. I come from Zaporizhia. I studied English basically since I remember myself. It has been my favorite subject at school, and that led me to become a flex student. I'm wondering how many of you here are or were flex students. That would be cool to know if there are more flexers here in the audience. So my very last year of high school, I was a flex student. And for those who don't know about the flex program, it means that I spent 1 whole year of high school here in the US, and I lived in an American family and went to a regular high school here in the US. And that was very life-changing experience. Of course, it helped me to improve my English even more. And that was the time when I decided on what I wanted to do. I wanted to become a filmmaker even before that, but because of that year in the United States in high school, I saw that it was actually possible, and I decided that I wanted to pursue that. And that's where my story as a filmmaker begins. And with time, I also developed a huge interest in environmentalism. So basically, I consider myself an environmental filmmaker, meaning that I make films about climate change and everything about that. Yeah. So that was back in 2012 when I was a Flex alumni, and I came to study here in the United States. It was 2020. So that whole journey of me being a student of high school all the way to being a master's student was 8 years. So it was a long process to get there. And yeah, gonna talk more about that in a bit. So why the United States? So first of all, of course, I considered many different options. I was someone living in Ukraine. I was looking at all possible options in Europe. I was looking at Germany and other potential places. Of course, what so great about the US is English, and that was the only foreign language I was fluent at the time. So that was a big reason to be looking at the United States. Also, I have already lived in the United States for a year before I knew about the life in the US. I knew what to expect. I knew people, the culture, how people communicate here, all of that. And of course, I was already familiar with the higher education system here. So it was kind of easier for me to navigate that system, to navigate that application process, since I was already introduced to it before. And as I was saying, I'm a Flex alumni of 2012. This was when I graduated from Flex. And of course, being part of the Flex community is such a huge plus because you get to be exposed to all sorts of different programs, get all those connections and networking events. And this is how I came to know about EducationUSA. And through that, that's how I came to know about competitive college club and other programs that came with it. And of course, yeah, it took some time. I can share my very kind of beginnings of this. I tried to apply to the universities in the US for bachelor's, and I was successful in terms of being accepted. But at that time, I wasn't able to secure full funding, so I couldn't go to study film in the US back then. So I went and I studied at a Ukrainian university, and it was even a different field of studies, not connected to cinema at all. So that was another reason to be looking at the US, because in most other countries you have to start from the beginning. You have to um, start with the first year of bachelor's program in basically any new field. But in the US, if you have relevant work experience and portfolio, in my case, you can go directly to master's. So of course, for me, for someone who already had a bachelor's degree, I didn't want to repeat 3 to 4 years again. And that was another big factor of me deciding on going to the US. And then, yeah, of course, it was a long process again. It took time to build my film portfolio. It took time to research all of my options. And thanks to the help of EducationUSA, eventually I made it. So I'm going to talk about all of the steps that I took on my journey. So the whole process of me basically deciding that I wanted to apply for a master's program in film in the US, to me coming to the US for that same program, took about 2 years. And it started with me applying to be part of a competitive college club, which I applied for, was accepted to, and of course, I attended all of the seminars and all of the meetings and followed the advice of the mentors. And of course, it's been great because it's such an amazing resource about all of these steps, everything. They won't do your work for you, but they will point you in the right direction, and they will give you the steps that you need to take in order to be successful on this journey. So I became part of competitive college club in the fall of 2018, and of course it started with research about the schools that I was interested in, the programs that I was interested in. Of course, in my case, it was film directing, and I looked at a ton of universities, all sorts of lists, all sorts of top film school lists of the US, and yeah, etc., etc. So one thing was to find programs I was interested in. Another thing was to find the funding that was available in those schools. That's a whole other category of research, right? So, of course, all of us have different situations. In my case, I could only go to the US if I got the full funding. So that was my goal. And then also another big part of the process is reaching out to the schools. So for example, they have some information on their websites, but it is not clear, for example, what percentage of the tuition they can cover, or what sorts of grants might be available to international students, because in general, there's a lot of funding available for domestic students, US citizens, but that same funding might not be available for international students. So you have to always read a lot and very carefully on each university's website specifically, and then reach out and ask those questions. So I was reaching out to first of all, professors of the programs I was interested in with any sorts of questions about the program, and some funding questions too. And then obviously, if you're not addressing the right person, they will usually redirect you to the right person. And usually all of the bigger universities have international students offices, and other departments that are responsible specifically for funding, for scholarships. So those are the places where you would also reach out to and ask your questions. So it's a lot of work, and no one will do this work for you. You know that these are the steps that you need to take, and you just do it. And then that's part of it. So eventually you narrow down your list, and so the school is good for this, but they don't give this funding, so there's no reason to be applying there. Of course, you can research other external sources of funding, but yeah, I'm sure that EducationUSA would give any possible resources on that. In my field, I was not really able to find any external sources of funding, so I was fully relying on funding from the school I was applying to. Right, so once you have researched your schools, once you've established those connections, once you kind of figure out the funding opportunities and possibilities, and you know where you are applying for, of course, all schools have different application requirements. You go again on the website, and there's a list of full requirements that they have. In my case, since it's a creative field, a very big part of the application package was a portfolio, and also many schools were asking for creative tasks, creative projects that I were to make specific. So yeah, again, if you have 10 different schools you want to apply for, and all of them have different requirements, all of them have different kinds of essay questions, different kinds of portfolio requirements, you have to fulfill all of that. So you have to set aside a big amount of time in order to fulfill all of that. And of course, they will have testing requirements for international students. We all have to take TOEFL, which is the English language test. I'm sure you all know about it. And that one is not particularly hard. Well, it wasn't hard for me. It was okay. And depending on whether you are applying for bachelor's degree or master's degree, you take other tests that have questions from different fields. Like for me, for master's, I took GRE, which basically had a reading section. It had math questions. Yeah, that one was not fun. So you have to set aside a whole other period of time to just get ready for those tests. Just do a bunch of practice tests. And now remembering that whole process, that was really not the most exciting part of this whole process. Yeah, I did do a bunch of practice tests for GRE specifically, especially math, like refreshing all of that after years of not really doing any of that was pretty challenging. But yeah, eventually I got through that. And luckily for creative field, those tests are a pretty important part of the application process, but they are not the most important part. So that kind of played in my favor, I guess. So yeah, returning to the applications, of course, again, there is such a thing as application fees. I'm pretty sure you know all about that. Since I was also part of the Opportunity Fund program, I qualified for some of those fees being paid for by the program. So that was great, but I was still required to reach out to the universities and ask them if they could waive the application fees, and many of them actually did. So I ended up paying maybe 1/3 of the application fees that were originally required, but the rest were waived. So it always pays off to ask these sort of questions. Yeah. So I can tell you exactly that I was applying to 7 universities, and eventually I was accepted to 6 of them, which is a little bit that didn't accept me is where I really didn't want to go to. So yeah, the rest of the universities accepted me with different financial packages. And obviously, I had to go with the one that offered the most generous financial package. And that turned out to be my dream school. And we'll get to that in a second on the next slide or so. A little bit more in terms of portfolios and creative tasks. Of course, there's a lot of different fields of creative studies, right? You might be an artist, you might be a writer. For me as a director, it was important to have some visual materials. And I have had shot several short films before, and also before application process, I already worked as a videographer, and I already took part in a lot of international projects where I made a few social ads and other things. And yeah, all of that definitely built up a pretty strong portfolio. So I had 2 really well shot short films. One of them at that point has had a pretty successful festival run. Like it was screened at maybe more than 10 different international film festivals around the world, and it was used as a educational material because it was a documentary on plastic pollution, returning to me being an environmental filmmaker. So yeah, definitely that was I already had a pretty strong portfolio for that program. And Another thing that they required was sort of creative tasks, which will be, of course, different from university to university. And depending on how well you do that, depending on how much time you put into those tasks, that also proves to be quite decisive. Another thing, after you fulfilled all of these application requirements, you submitted all of the documents, all of the test results, recommendation letters, essays, motivation letters, and whatnot. The next round is usually the interviews. And in my case, I've had interviews probably with 3 or 4 of the schools, because some schools don't require interviews. So it will all be part of that application process with each specific school. Interview for my school that I ended up going to were quite chill, really. I talked to a couple of the professors, and we were just talking about films and our passion for filmmaking. And it was just a very nice way of connecting to the people, and almost like informal way for them to see my passion and my reasoning for choosing that school and choosing that particular major, and why that had to be me and why that had to be my passion. So, but it was overall, it was really nice. Of course, you have to be super well prepared, knowing everything about the school and the program, and you need to ask questions about the program so that they know that you're really interested in specifically them, and not just randomly applying everywhere. And the time frame for the application specifically was that once I've had the test results, it was the summer of 2019 when I took all of those tests. And then basically from then on, I started preparing all of these application materials for all of the schools. So that was several months, from September into probably January. So yeah, it literally took about 6 months to apply to every school with all of the um, materials that they required, including portfolios and creative tasks, and writing targeted essays and motivation letters, and asking for recommendations, and all of that. And then in February, I actually heard back from my dream school and were accepted and got the funding. So yeah. Moving on to what happened next was me getting accepted to my school, right? So at that point, it was me communicating with the school's admissions office and international students office, which were basically my best friends, really. And of course, I still had full support from the EducationUSA to ask to answer any of my questions about the visa, because yeah, at that point you just have to do what you have to do, which is receiving your visa and making sure all of your documents are ready to go into the US. And that includes vaccination requirements. You need to make sure that you have all of the required vaccinations. You need to make sure you have thought about your housing, where you will live. Need to make sure you know about all of the costs involved. There's tuition, which in my case I received the scholarship for, which was very amazing. But except for that, obviously there are additional costs like international student health insurance. It is quite expensive. There are other additional fees in every school for like using gym, or some graduation fee, or some enrollment fee, all sorts of fees that end up being hundreds and hundreds of dollars anyway. So there are, even if you have full funding, there are still costs that you will end up paying. So it is very good to know about those in advance and kind of be ready for that. Of course, living expenses. In my case, no one was paying for my living expenses, so I had to rely on myself to pay the rent, to pay for transport, obviously food. So you need to be prepared in terms of knowing how much rent costs in every particular city. Chicago is a big city with a wide range of available housing, right? But still, it is a bigger city, so the rent tends to be quite high. So I had to figure out all of that before coming uh, and knowing that I can do it. Um, yeah, CNN is a social security number, and this is something that you get once you have any sort of work offer. In my case, my school offered me assistantship, which means that I was working on campus. And as an international student, you are allowed only 20 hours per week of work, which is not that much. Like, usually it would not be enough to cover all of your living expenses unless you plan very, very carefully. But yeah, that was one of the very first things for me to do once I got to the US. I received my social security number, and only after that I was able to start working. And of course, working on campus was something that I relied on for my living expenses. And yeah, it got me through school somehow. And of course, there was the pandemic. I came to the United States, it was the fall of 2020. So yeah, it was probably not the most exciting time to come here, but yeah, there are ups and downs. But yeah, moving on to my school. Um, Talking about the school, I hope that you can take it as a kind of framework for to apply for any other school. So my school was called Columbia College Chicago, and it is considered as one of the major liberal arts schools in the United States. So basically, all of the majors here are very creative. There's a big film department, TV department, uh, design, music, all sorts of creative stuff, really. Um, yeah, so this would be a great school for any of you who are interested in the arts. But probably the main thing to know about any school is that there's always an international students office, and those people are literally your best friends. It's almost like they are they're not technically responsible for you, but they are in a way responsible for you to make sure that all of your documents are in order, all of your visa status and all of your work authorizations and all of that. Once you are in the US, basically, yeah, those people were my best friends. And if it wasn't for International Students Office, I don't know, I would probably lose my mind with all of this bureaucracy and this sort of thing, because it's a lot to navigate this whole system, especially being an international student and just navigating all of these nuances with work authorizations and what you're able to do, what you're not able to do, what sort of work you can do. Um, Usually, student employment is available, but sometimes it is very limited. And as I mentioned before, you're allowed to work only 20 hours per week. Yeah, and then every school usually has something that is called something like career center, and those people are your second best friends, really. Over my 3 years at Columbia, I think, yeah, I've had a number of one-on-one conversations with career center specialists who helped me to build my portfolio further, to make it look professional, to work on my resume, to work on my cover letters for work applications. I mean, those people have been amazing, really. Um, yeah. So two best friends, International Students Office and Career Center equivalents in any school. Those are the resources that you would have to be using and utilizing, making sure that you know those people and you establish good connections with them. And yeah, it's been extremely helpful. And then, of course, it just helps to know what other resources your school provides and just be really good at navigating that. Because usually people don't even know about the resources that are available to them. So being proactive and asking and looking very carefully for the information on the website is always helpful. Yeah, and my experience in Colombia in general, I don't want to take too much time with it, but it has been pretty great. I've met a lot of collaborators that I am in touch with, and I'm sure I will work with again over the course of my career. And I've made several more short films that I'm quite proud of, and some of them will be entering the festival circuit soon. And my thesis film is still being finished, and once it's done, it will probably be my best film up to date. And also, I discovered writing skills that I passion for writing, actually, and now I am enhancing my writing skills. So that's another area that Columbia College Chicago helped me to discover, which I'm pretty happy about, of course. Yeah, as far as the city of Chicago goes, um, I can talk about it a lot in terms of both negative and positive, and it will be pretty much the same about many other cities in the United States. You see all of these beautiful pictures, right, in the tourist guides, and it feels so glamorous and so amazing. But what you also will see is a lot of contrast and a lot of things that are not usual for us as Ukrainians. Like, yeah, I guess I shouldn't dive too deep into this, but it is important to not have pink eyeglasses when you go to the US and realize that this country has a lot of its own problems. And yeah, things things on this side are different, and a lot of the things here are different. And yeah, it's not better or worse, it's just very different, and you have to be prepared for that. Like, if you Google Chicago, you for sure will find a lot of, I don't know, funny images and memes about this, but also some serious things. Like, as you probably know, United States doesn't really have a lot of gun regulation, so a lot of people own guns, and there's a lot of gang violence around, and it might not be safe to be walking into certain neighborhoods. And it is a reality of living in a big city like Chicago. You have to always know your surroundings, where you can go, where you can't go. The train, like, back in Kiev, I never had any safety concerns on the underground. And here it's like you have to be always prepared to exit at the next stop. And yeah, so safety concerns are real here, and you have to be really street smart. And yeah. Um, yeah. And shifting gears to what I'm currently up to, as I mentioned, I have graduated about half a year ago. Um, Again, the connections that I've made during my time at Columbia really have helped me finding the work and staying in the business. I can say that uh, filmmaking is a very challenging field in general, in a way that you don't just go to a big corporation and apply for a job and get accepted and stay there in the corporate environment and work like 9 to 5. It's nothing like that. Most of the time it is freelance based and contract based, meaning that you have to be constantly looking for new jobs and new opportunities and new collaborations. So this is where my field might not be so relevant to a lot of you, so I won't be diving too much into that. But what is relevant for everyone to know is that after you graduate from an American university, you can stay here for 1 year for OPT, which means optional practical training, and that is basically your work authorization for 1 year past graduation to work in your field of study. You cannot work at, random McDonald's or I don't know, something else. You have to stay in your field of study to continue maintaining that status. And it is great that you get that year. And after that, you can figure out the next steps in terms of visas. Of course, this would be a whole other discussion going into that and those opportunities. But who knows what's next, because it is very challenging. All of the immigration system in the United States is extremely challenging to navigate. So I don't know if I will stay here or if I return back to Ukraine or if I go to another country, because there's no certainty right now. But there are definitely opportunities, and just having this behind my shoulders, having this experience of living in the US and having a US diploma is definitely a big step forward in my career, and something that no matter where I end up working, I can apply, and it will be great. And currently I work at a TV channel here in Chicago, which is called A Window to the World. I worked on a TV show with a host that does a lot of shows about Chicago, actually showing some of the nice parts about it and interesting historical facts and architecture and all of that. If you're interested, I could share that show with you if you would like to learn more about Chicago and the type of work that I do currently. So far, I've been pretty happy in that job, and I guess we see where life takes me after that. And I guess at this point, I'm open to answering any of your questions. I know I covered so many things, like from researching and application process and through my experience in the US, and now, thoughts about post-graduation in such a short period of time. So yeah, I would love to answer any of the specific questions about any of the parts of the journey.
Thank you so much, Kateryna, for a highly interesting presentation. I very much enjoy it. And I would just like to encourage our lovely viewers at home to please feel free to reach out to us. We would love to hear from you and chat with you in the comments. So while we wait for questions, I actually have one of my own, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
And it would be about putting together your portfolio for application. I was wondering, how did you choose the pieces for your portfolio? Did you have any process for that?
Yeah, sure. I guess it all depends on the university where you're applying to and their specific requirements. Some of them might require you to submit a piece that is 4 minutes long, right? For example, so you have to choose like literally the 4 strongest minutes of your film, or if it's like 2 or 3 films, you have to choose like, I don't know, the best scenes in each of them. So it is a process of just looking at your application as a whole and seeing what is your strong part. For example, if you apply as a cinematographer, right, that means that you have to choose something that is visually extremely good and extremely striking and just beautifully shot, right? For me as a director, writer, it was important to show that I could tell a story. So even if I didn't have, for example, like super amazing camera to shoot my film with or something like that, if I could choose a story and I could show that I can tell it well, then that's what would count. Yeah, overall, I guess it's now been what, 4 years since since I applied, so I might already not remember such nuances, but I remember specifically for Columbia College Chicago, I could submit my films, and I think I was able to submit the full films there. Yeah, I actually remember right now. I created a PDF document, and each page of that document was a representation of a project that I did. So, for example, page one, this film, and some information about the film, some stills from the film, and the link to watch the film. Like, next page, same thing for another film. Next page, like I did, for example, a social ad campaign. Let's say, about equal rights. So I would have again the link, I would have a short description of the project. Make sure you very distinctly credit of what exactly you did, like you did, or if you directed it, or if you shot it, or if you edited it, like whatever your role was in that particular project, you have to clearly identify it. Yeah, so I guess my portfolio was like, I think I probably submitted around 5 to 7 projects. So that means that I had 2 short films and then maybe some films that were at that point in development, in the editing. So um, that, and then some of the short form projects, like I mentioned, social ads, and that was the portfolio itself. And then, as I was saying, they sometimes they would require you to do some creative tasks specifically for them. And in terms of specifically with Columbia, it was one of the essay questions, and I was to write an essay about my favorite director and why. And I wrote about Agnieszka Holland, who is a Polish filmmaker, director, and she's probably my idol. And I mean, her films are just where I aspire to be, hopefully, sometime. uh, and another thing was to tell a story in pictures. Um, yeah, I don't remember the details about it, but it was something about having a certain set of pictures, and you were required to put them in a certain order and tell a story through those pictures. So yeah, that was a little bit of a creative challenge. So yeah, that was specifically for Columbia.
Thank you so much for such an informative answer. And we've got a question from Kirill. So Kirill is wondering, what things can raise your possibility of entering a US university? Like, what specific things should you do? Some school activities or other ways?
Yeah, I imagine you are planning to apply for a bachelor degree. When you're applying for a bachelor degree, of course, you probably don't have work experience yet, right? Because you're coming just from high school. And yes, it is extremely important to show that except for fulfilling the curriculum and having good grades, they don't have to be excellent or perfect, but just good enough grades for all of your subjects. You do something extracurricular, whether it's sports or some other activities that can show your capabilities to be a leader. If you are into sports, if yeah, that could be an amazing pathway to getting into the university. Like if you do some sport professionally, if you're a member of a team, or if you're a master of sport or something like that, that is highly valued when you apply for bachelor degree, and you can actually receive scholarship to go to university specifically for doing doing sport activity. I know someone who received a scholarship to play tennis. So yeah, if you're interested in that, if you're good at any sort of sport, and by good I don't mean that you won Olympic Games, but if you're good on your local level, or maybe it would be nice on a national level, then it heightens your possibilities a lot. If you're not into sports, it is definitely helpful to show your other interests. Maybe you play music, maybe you attended musical school, maybe you did a lot of volunteering with some local organization. Like whatever you have been doing for some extended amount of time that you can show that you're good at, or you've had any accomplishments, you received any like thank you certificates, any of that sort of thing, that is definitely a big help in your whole application process.
Thank you so much, Kateryna, for a great reply. And I would just like to add, Kirill, if you're interested about learning more about applying to the US, would like to get some resources and materials that can help you on your journey, I would like to suggest you sign up for a free consultation with one of our lovely advisors. We would love to help you along and make sure that your dream of studying in the US becomes a reality. So the next question we have is from Igor. So Igor is wondering, may I ask what your GPA in high school was?
Sure. Well, again, for masters, it was more relevant what my bachelor's GPA was, and I did receive a red diploma in bachelor, so technically it would be 4.0. But
Thank you
for
so
a
much for your
creative
answer.
field, it's not that important. It is important, it is good, but it is not the only thing that counts.
Yes, thank you so much. And another question that I was wondering about would be, what help did you receive from Education USA?
Yes, of course. Yes, that was amazing. I guess I can journey back in time a little bit. So when I was a flexer, so it was my last year of high school, right? And I started doing this whole thing of applying to American universities for bachelor degree on my own. And it was extremely challenging because I didn't have any of the resources at that point, and I was learning all of this on my own when I was 17, and it was like extremely challenging. I still could do it, but it was just a nightmare to navigate all of that on my own. And then luckily, like years from then, like after I have already received my bachelor's degree, I learned about Education USA, thanks to the Flex network, and yeah, just being in touch with the Flex community. I learned about them, and of course signed up for whatever information sessions they had, and I learned about competitive college club, and through that I also applied for opportunity fund, which I luckily received. um yeah, I mean, I just got um basically carried through this whole process with the amazing team, and all of this is for free. I mean, it's amazing how, where else can you have this sort of thing for free? And these guys are such professionals, such amazing professionals in every field of study. Basically, there's someone who specializes in that thing, in that specific thing, so you get any of the questions answered. And what is the most important is that you have a whole frame of work, like, you know, the process step by step. So you kind of have a list of the things that you need to do, and you just follow these steps, and then each step of the way, you ask questions, you get answers, and yeah, it's been amazing. So yeah, I mean, I don't think I would be able to do what I did if it wasn't for the help and the constant mentorship and check-ins. And yeah, it's been amazing. I am extremely grateful.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience. And just to reiterate what Kateryna has said, please feel free to reach out to our lovely advisors and check out our website and our social media posts. You'll find a wealth of information and resources that will help you on your journey. And if you would like to learn more about our cohort programs and your 5 steps to US studies, then please do not hesitate to sign up for a consultation, and we will provide you with all the resources and support that you need. So we've got another question from Kirill. So Kirill is wondering, if I want to go to the US with a U4U program, will it interfere with enrollment? I do think I should take this one question. So Kirill, thank you so much for reaching out. We do not advise on residency programs in the United States. However, please feel free to once again sign up for a free consultation to discuss your particular case, and we will help you find the best path to your study and, of course, help you with the search for the university of your dreams. I guess a final question on my part would be a rather general one. So what advice would you maybe like to share with aspiring students who are looking to study in the United States?
Yeah, sure. I guess for people who have decided that this is what you want to do, and for people who are preparing maybe to go to the US for their studies, who know that they're coming, I guess I would really encourage you to look at things in an objective way and don't idealize the United States. Don't make it into something that it is not. It is a country like any other with its own opportunities, and sure, it provides a lot of great opportunities, but also the culture is totally different. The working culture, like how you apply for jobs, how you stay in the jobs, like all of that is totally different. It's not worse or better, it's just different. So I guess I would just advise to anyone to be very open and not create an image of the country that you think it is and then come here and be disappointed, but rather perceive everything as it comes to you and talk to people who live here, share their experience with you, and yeah, just be prepared that it is not a Hollywood film. It is reality that you're dealing with, and you will have to deal with a lot of administrative things, bureaucracy things, and it is just part of life. And yeah, it is not ideal, but it is great. It is interesting. It's definitely worth experiencing it, and some people like it, some people don't. Let's put it this way.
Thank you so much, Kateryna, for sharing some great pieces of advice and tips with aspiring students in Ukraine. And just to reiterate, once again, we are here to support you. And if you have any questions about the application process to the US, or in particular are curious about what programs, scholarships, or colleges and universities you might be eligible for, please feel free to reach out and we will help you and support you on your journey. Keep believing in yourself. Stay with Education USA. Next week, we're planning a session on how test scores can impact your chances of receiving a scholarship. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And we'd love to see you next time. Stay safe and stay with Education USA. Bye.